Chris mentioned, I've been teaching here at UMass for, this is my 35th year. I was just recalling how after when I did 30 years, they had the years of service assembly for the faculty, and they gave me a really nice mantle clock and everything. I thought it was just such a nice way for the administration to say, time's running out, you know, better finish up.
You don't let people go that easily.
All right, so I kind of just about blended courses, the future of teaching. I think that's a provocative title. Obviously, there's a lot of different futures of teaching, massive online courses, for example. But I wanted to try to communicate some of the excitement I have for the implementation of blended learning that I've done in a class that I've been teaching for a number of years. A little context, I'm a political psychologist, and starting in 1980, I taught a course called Social Attitudes and Public Opinion. I began teaching it, which was designed to really teach students to explore all the factors that really affect public opinion. I start out talking about the sort of 8th grade civics model of public opinion, that people have opinions and the government understands those and implements policies to express those policies. And so we say, no, actually the government is actively involved in trying to influence policy, actively involved in trying to influence the opinions that people have. Media is obviously exerting a considerable influence. The government uses the media through intimidation reporters and leaks and so on like that to influence public opinion. A whole range of different social factors are influential upon public opinion. And then there's actually also an area that I call affect displacement, which I've been doing research on for 20 years, but I won't be talking about that today for completeness. I thought I'd include that. All right, so I have taken a series of faculty seminars over the years, back really in the 1980s, an early iteration of what's become CIT, the Ford Foundation funded some seminars, and I really learned how to, one of the papers we read was to not be constrained by what they call the Atlas complex. That in teaching your class, the faculty person has to control everything, and everything is on your shoulders for the class to be a success, but instead to devolve the learning into learning loops. I thought that was a great idea. I've really used that for about 30 years. Then in the 90s, I started using, Bob Rissy got me involved in using instructional technology, and then in the 2000s started doing online classes, and all of these elements have fed into the blended teaching that I'm doing now. What I wanted to do today was to sort of demonstrate 2 different class meetings that I've done actually in this classroom. And in my original conception of this talk was to have all of you sitting at computers and actually do it. I think that might have been too ambitious, so I'll just sort of talk. If there's time, we can all do that. But anyway, and really what's happened is the combination of blended learning and a classroom like this is allowing me to teach the way I remember, 35 years ago saying, boy, wouldn't it be great if I could do this? And now I'm able to do it, and I'll show you what I'm doing. So, taught this class starting in 1980, just sort of face-to-face, developed lectures and questions about the reading that students did. In the 1990s, I added instructional technology, PowerPoints, started using mass media, more showing students, videotapes of news stories and so on like that. In 2000s, I developed an online version of the course, which involved me narrating a series of PowerPoints that the students had and sort of implementing the course sort of fully online. And then I remember, actually I have a colleague out in California, Tom Nickel, who has his PhD in instructional technology. And I asked him, geez, isn't there some way that you sort of combine online teaching and face-to-face teaching? And he said, yes, it's called blended learning. And the light bulb went off, and he said, that's where I'm going. So I think around 2008, I forget the exact year, I started teaching my blended class, which has involved a combination of using the narrated PowerPoints that I created for the online class, implementing the threaded discussions, the topics that I had as sort of an incentive to get students to keep up and be prepared for each class meeting, which we would meet once a week. And then I have gradually sort of taken the old exercises that I had created and then tried and sort of really, I think, enhanced them for a blended context. So, the major goals of the course are to get students to really analyze media and news media in a careful way. Actually, after the whole course, I show them for the final exam, one part of it, a news story from the end of the first week. It was on NBC, Tom Brokaw, the first week after Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait. It's a couple-minute news story. They've never seen it before, and they have to analyze it from the perspective of all the material in the course. And students do great on it if they've done the reading and come to class. So media analysis skills is important, and also sort of a knowledge of how public opinion operates, which I think is an important aspect of citizenship. So I'm going to talk about consequently 2 sessions that I do, one on the sort of role of news media, how that affects presidential popularity, and then looking at the ways in a statistical way how social factors are related to public opinion. All right, so this was our model that we went back, that I generated earlier. We'll talk about the media piece and the way the government, the media, and the public are all interrelated. So I give the students background reading on the mass media. W. Lance Bennett sort of talks about how the news, they personalize it, it's dramatized, fragmented, and so on. We talk about the rally effect, which is the wag the dog film that probably Dustin Hoffman, I think it was Dustin Hoffman, you're familiar with. The president engages in decisive military action. That's been shown in the short term and with a variety of different constraints to increase presidential popularity. And then I have some great reading and great paper by Murray Edelman, who really sort of analyzes systematically how governments try to generate specific cognitions in the public. Specifically, some people are evil, actions are evil, we have friends, allies, and the government can understand issues that perplex the public. All right, so I started actually in my face-to-face class back in 1989. A colleague told me about this 60-minute story that came out a year after the first George Bush sent troops in to invade Panama to depose Manuel Noriega. And the 60 Minutes story sort of revealed, they called it Victims of Just Cause, and I also sort of included some excerpts from this award-winning documentary that came out called The Panama Deception, that there was something like, in the bombing that took place and the subsequent fire, there was something like 3,000 to 4,000 civilians who were killed and buried in mass graves, a number of which were on U.S. military bases. No one really knew about this. Some of these graves were exhumed, lots of bodies. So I thought that's a perfect example to sort of look at the interaction of the mass media coverage of this and say, what did people know at that time? And so I went to the Vanderbilt University Television News Archive, where they had archives of keyword searchable archives of all the news stories from all the major networks for a number of years. So I searched on civilian casualties, developed a body of news stories for that. And then, so here's like an ABC story on December 21st, 89, after the invasion, and then Noriega, he was featured. And in all the stories, we're talking at least something about civilian casualties. This was the official figure that the U.S. military released, that there were only 220, and that was actually later reduced to 202. All right, so for a few years we did that, but if you look at the sort of public opinion, before the invasions, October, before the December '89 invasion, only 37% of people thought, yeah, we should send in military troops to get rid of Noriega. After the invasion, 82% were supportive, so that it was a tremendous rally round the flag effect. All right? Now, a few years later, Clinton ended up, remember the Haitian boat people were landing in Miami. Clinton had to do something. He ended up sending troops there, and I thought, that's a nice comparison there. So I again went to the Vanderbilt archives, got a number of news stories, sort of pre and post the invasion, as Clinton makes his plans. And if you look at the public opinion here, 29% thought he was doing a good job. This is August, before the October invasion. His popularity went up, but only to 49%. So there was a much more muted rally around the flag effect. You remember, he was going to invade, and all of a sudden Carter and Colin Powell cut a deal, and everything was sweetness and light, and Raoul Cedras agreed to leave peacefully, and Jean-Bertrand Aristide was returned, and so on like that. So there were no civilian casualties, no U.S. casualties. All right? So big difference in the government actions, in the way the media covered it. And so I developed this compare and contrast assignment. All right. To facilitate that, I generated a series of sort of note-taking sheets that students could use for the Panama news stories and for the Haiti news stories. And so when I was doing face-to-face, I would take several days and show all these news stories in class, because I had them on VHS tape. Then I had, actually that should be students, the students wrote a little mini assignment, sort of trying to integrate this, but it was clearly, the papers just weren't very good. They weren't getting it. They weren't really analyzing the media. They had just seen it once, in class, and I told them to take notes, but I don't think they did really well with that. I changed and started dividing students into learning groups. I thought that would sort of increase the interaction among students and the learning, and they turned in one group paper, so a number of different group papers, but still I was disappointed they weren't analyzing the media in the way that I really, in the detail that I really would have liked, and relating it to the reading and so on. So when blended learning came around, I started thinking about how this could be implemented, and I saw a real opportunity there. So for this media assignment that takes place in here, the week before, I have all the media files on Blackboard, and so their assignment is to watch all these media files and take notes. And then when they come in, when we meet in class, then I first start a review, because we meet once a week. We review, and they've been doing a threaded discussion sort of leading up to this class session. And then I review quickly the sort of perspectives that I want them to think about, the rally effect, the Edelman cognitions, and so on. And then I, again, divide it into groups, and then I give them what I call a Panama Haiti news hunt, which is a big sheet with a series of different questions. For example, what radio host and future Fox News anchor talked to a caller who wondered whether President Clinton would be first off the boat when the troops got sent in an invasion to Haiti, when the invasion was still being considered prior to the invasion. So I got, in this news story, Sean Hannity was a radio, they had video of Sean Hannity talking to a caller or something like that. And so to get the students sort of involved in finding different pieces of information, and then again sort of looking at it from the perspectives we talked about, Walter Lance Bennett, and the different types of sort of categories of news. All right, so what's happened then is now, using the blended format, students can watch these couple hours of media stories, when you put together the 60-minute story and excerpts from the Panama Deception documentary and the news stories from Panama and the news story of Haiti. So it's several, it would take up a lot, and it used to take up a lot of class time. And if students missed a class, then they missed all this media content. So now on Blackboard, they can watch all the media at their convenience. I can use class time much more efficiently. And the students then write a 3 to 4 page paper analyzing this, and the papers are much better. They really are able to reference specific elements of news stories, of evidence of government control, of the limiting of information, and so on like that. So I'm quite happy. And we meet in here, and they've installed at my request speakers on 4 or 5 of the computers so that the students can pull together as a group and watch media stories and talk about them and go through the sheet and so on like that. I find this room is so much more effective as a place to be than the room with just a few kind of rows of computers where they can't really come together as a group. So I was hoping the provost was going to be here so I could urge him to make lots more of these classrooms, but we'll maybe have to pass on the request. All right, so the second example that I wanted to talk about is this sort of left-hand side of this diagram, where we talk about the variety of different demographic effects that affects obviously people's life experience and the way their opinions on a variety of different issues develop. So again, there's background reading that they do prior to class. My first book was called Persuasion Politics, which really grew out of my teaching of this public opinion class. So I have a chapter on social factors and public opinion. I've narrated a PowerPoint that updated a lot of the research. What's the relationship of age to public opinion and gender and race and so on. Then in the class meeting, so this assignment to a certain extent spills over a couple different weeks. In the class meeting the week before the big social factors meeting, I showed the students this Roper Center or iPoll public opinion database that the library was was wonderfully got at my request. I don't know if anyone else uses it, but I have a great time using it. So the University of Connecticut maintains this huge public opinion database of, it's 1 million questions, or 500,000 or something like that. And so a keyword searchable database. So for example, if you search on gay marriage, you get like this question from the Princeton Survey Research Associates, think about the legal rights of gay and lesbian couples. Do you support full marriage rights, or a whole variety of different options? All right. So that was done, and it tells you who did it, when it was done, and so on. So they've heard about the iPoll database, and then during the week prior to class, then they have an assignment where they have to use the iPoll database to find public opinion specifically on the Panama and Haiti invasions, again, as sort of a sort of practice of that. So they have to find actually 4 polls, one pre-invasion, one post-invasion for each of the different situations for Panama and Haiti. So the different assignments sort of overlap. So they've gotten sort of some experience using iPoll. And then they listen to my narrated PowerPoint that talks about the social factors and public opinion that sort of complements the other reading. And I also include that PowerPoint also includes a discussion of the chi-square statistic that I'll talk about in just a minute. All right. And so they have that chapter on e-reserve in the library. So then, day of the class, they meet right here. This should be very familiar to you. We start out again, I sort of review again some of the sort of basic factors, some of the basic results that they've looked at. One of the big factors is that the relationship of ideology to public opinion depends upon the type of issue. And research has identified sort of three major types of issues. There's social issues of abortion and gay marriage. There's economic issues, taxes, spending. There's foreign policy issues. And the way in which different factors like education and income are related to opinion on these issues varies. So that, so they said they know about that. And then I show them an advanced aspect of the iPoll database that allows for demographic breakdowns. So again, this was our gay marriage question. Just some of the questions have this little special icon, which I think is a little Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass there with a little plus on it. And if you click on that, you get the option of breaking down the opinion by a various different sets of demographic background variables. So here are the different options: support full marriage rights, support civil unions, opposing legal recognition, and then by education, this one. So there were 78 high school grads who supported full marriage rights, only 113 high school grads who opposed any legal recognition. And so the table is percentaged across what is essentially the dependent variable in this case, because we would assume that their education is going to influence their opinion rather than their opinion influencing their level of education. All right, so I reviewed the chi-square statistic and found they have a link to this interactive chi-square program that lets you put in raw numbers for a 10 by 10 table, but in our case there were three different full marriage rights, limited, opposed, by three levels of education. So have them, and so again, I divide them into learning groups and give them an assignment to choose a public opinion question, an area, and a question that they'd like to follow up on. They've heard about a whole series of the background reading and so on like that. In 1980, it was the case that women were much more anti-nuclear than men. All right, is that still the case? They get a chance to find out, to update that. So they choose an issue that they're really interested in to follow up on, divide them into groups, and then they choose an area, and then using iPoll, they have to find a question that has that little magnifying glass with the green options. They can break it down demographically, and then they have to put in the numbers into the chi-square program and find out, is there a significant relationship or not? So they have to conduct that chi-square analysis. So for example, these numbers, they have these sort of raw numbers, 78, 73, 133, and so on. They have to translate those into this table, 78, whatever. Click on that button right there that says calculate, and then the result pops up here with this measure of statistical significance. So if this number here, this p-value, is less than 0.05, then it's really unlikely that they would have gotten a result just by chance if there was really no relationship. Here, this p-value says there's only, I think, 539 chances out of a million that they would have gotten a chi-square this big just by chance if there's really no relationship. So that says, yes, there is a relationship of education to gay rights, all right? To opinion on gay rights. All right, so because you see in college, people with college plus support full marriage rights, 39% of them do, whereas only 30% of high school grads support full marriage rights. All right, so those are the types of relationships that they're able to test and look at and then report. So, previous week, students have kind of reviewed all the sort of background literature on these relationships, and then in class, they can choose an issue that's of interest to them. They get experience using this online public opinion database. They also get experience using an interactive statistical tool, just the same way a researcher would if they were addressing a particular question. And so, overall, I would argue across these, based on these two exercises and more that I've had experience, blended learning really lets both students and faculty allocate their time in a way that is most effective to them, to listen to lectures, not just the faculty showing up and talking, but at their convenience using the online format, and then in class doing things cooperatively with other students with the help and assistance of the faculty person, so that the learning is happening with their interaction with the, in this case, with the technology, with the media technology, with the statistical programs and the online databases. And I would argue, it's certainly been my experience that the learning outcomes have certainly been greatly enhanced by using this blended format.